They say betrayal doesn't happen all at once. It drips, like a leaky faucet in a quiet house, until one night, the sound is deafening. And by then, it's already flooded the floor. I didn't see it at first. Not really. I saw a tired wife. I saw deadlines. I saw how stress rode her shoulders, how she stopped laughing at the dumb jokes I made when I was making coffee. I told myself it was just a season. Marriage has those. I didn't see her lies. Not at first. Because I loved her too much to look. The first time I noticed something was wrong, it was something stupid. Her voicemail. I was driving back from a consulting job up in Sandpoint, dead tired, halfway through the Idaho Panhandle, when I called her just to hear her voice. She didn't pick up, but the voicemail that played, it was different. "Hey, it's me," she used to say. Soft, warm. "Leave something good, I might call back." But now it was colder. Shorter. "You've reached Meredith. Leave a message." I don't know why that hit me the way it did, but it did. Like she'd changed her voicemail not because she was bored of the old one, but because the voice she recorded it for wasn't me anymore. Meredith and I had been married for 8 years. No kids, not by choice. We'd been trying for 4 of those. Our careers made it hard. She was a physician assistant at a surgical center in Spokane, and I was a hydraulic systems engineer, spent a lot of time consulting on dam repair projects across the Pacific Northwest. The irony wasn't lost on me. I worked with water pressure for a living, but couldn't see the cracks forming in my own home. We lived in a 2-story house just off the ridge, where the pine trees thickened and the deer came right up to the edge of the deck. We had a good life. Or so I thought. But it was the voicemail that started the shift. From that moment on, things just felt off. She'd stop mid-sentence, like she forgot I was in the room. Her phone never left her side, even when she showered. One night, she didn't come home until nearly midnight, said an emergency surgery had gone long. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But when I asked for details, her story was full of gaps. The kind that don't come from exhaustion. The kind that come from editing. A week later, I found a pair of earrings on our bathroom counter. Tiny, gold, elegant, the kind she didn't wear. The kind that weren't hers. I picked them up like they might burn. She'd just gotten in from a girls' night. Was peeling off her makeup in the mirror. "These yours?" I asked. She paused just a second too long. "Oh yeah," she said. "Found them in my work bag. Must have fallen in during a lunch with Alana." "Alana doesn't wear earrings," I said, before I could stop myself. Meredith smiled, but her eyes didn't. "She does now." That was it. No big scene. No blow-up. Just a tiny fracture. But the thing about fractures is, when pressure builds, they don't stay tiny. The next day, I drove to work like I always did. But instead of heading straight to the site, I pulled over at the overlook just before the river bend and sat there for 20 minutes with the engine idling. I couldn't explain why. I just couldn't move. I kept thinking about those earrings. How they didn't match anything she owned. How she didn't even seem curious about them. Not a flicker of real interest. That's not how people react to something unfamiliar in their space. That's how people react when they've already rehearsed the lie. I started noticing more. The way she always showered as soon as she got home. The new perfume, floral and sharp, stuff she never wore around me. The stretch of nights where she was too tired, too distracted, too something. But when her phone buzzed, she smiled without meaning to. And then she started talking in her sleep. At first, it was murmurs. Incoherent phrases. But one night, I heard a name. Ben. Soft. Dreamy. She never said it again after that night. But it stayed with me. Ben. I didn't know a Ben. Not in her work circle, not in her family, not in any of the stories she told me. So I started looking. I wish I could say I handled it gracefully, that I gave her space, that I asked, "Are you happy?" and let her be honest. But I didn't do that. I became something else. I started checking her phone when she was in the shower. I memorized her passcode the way a soldier memorizes terrain. I tracked her calendar, compared it to her GPS data through our shared car insurance app. It logs every trip, location, time, duration. It was meant to help us qualify for safe driver discounts. Instead, it showed me the Tuesdays. Every other Tuesday, she drove to the same address across town, an apartment near Manitou Park. Not near the hospital. Not near any clinic. I Googled it. Condo complex. Mid-range. Nothing special. A man named Benjamin Moore was listed on the property records. Ben. I stared at the name like it was something sharp under my skin. I wanted to confront her. Wanted to scream. But I didn't. Not yet. Because something in me, something cold and calculating, wanted to see it. Needed to know, beyond question. If I was going to burn down my life, I wasn't going to do it over suspicion. So the next Tuesday, I told her I was flying out to Oregon for a dam inspection in Eugene. I packed a bag, kissed her goodbye, watched her pretend to be tired, watched her stretch and smile and tell me she'd miss me. Then I drove 2 blocks away, parked, and waited. 5 hours later, she left the house in jeans and a sweater I'd never seen before. She looked young in it. Alive. She took the freeway westbound, then cut south through town. At 5:32 p.m., she pulled into the condo complex. I followed at a distance, waited 3 minutes, then got out of the car. It felt like gravity had changed. Like every step took more effort than the last. I saw her at the door. He opened it. Tall, athletic, dark hair. Younger than me, maybe by 5 years. He smiled like a man who'd kissed her before. She stepped inside, and the door closed behind her. I stood there in the parking lot until my breath fogged the windshield. I didn't cry, didn't scream, didn't move. I just sat, staring at the numbers on the digital clock, watching each minute tick by like it was eating a piece of me. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a drunken one-night lapse. This was a routine. Every other Tuesday. Like clockwork. Like a second life she'd built under my nose. The strange thing? The first thing I felt wasn't rage. It was shame. Not for what she'd done, but for how long I'd let it happen. How many nights I'd lit candles, thinking maybe she just needed romance. How many mornings I made her breakfast, thinking food would bring us close again. I was loving a ghost, and she was sleeping in someone else's arms. I started the engine and drove. Not home. Not anywhere. Just drove through the hills until the city lights blurred and the highway turned black. When I finally stopped, I was 30 miles out, at a rest area overlooking the water. I got out of the car, looked at the dark lake below, and told myself, "You saw it. You know. Now it's time to decide who you're going to become." There's something strange that happens when you stop asking why someone betrayed you and start asking how. The shift is subtle, but once it happens, it changes everything. Because why is a cry for meaning, a search for justice, a plea. But how? How is a plan? 3 days after I watched Meredith step into that condo, I was back in our kitchen, standing in front of the fridge, staring at a sticky note she'd left on the door. "Pick up lemons if you stop by the store. Love you." I read it 3 times. Not because of what it said, but because of how she signed it. Love you. Not I love you. That tiny absence of a pronoun felt louder than it should have. Detached. Mechanical. Like she'd typed it out of habit. Like a signature she didn't believe in anymore. I was no longer looking at my marriage the way a husband does. I was looking at it the way I'd inspect a collapsed dam. Where did the first crack start? Where did the pressure shift? How deep did the damage go? I made coffee like always. Ate toast I barely tasted. Then I took a legal pad and started writing down everything I could remember. Patterns. Gaps in time. Names she mentioned. Anything that had once seemed normal and now seemed planted. And what I realized chilled me to my core. She'd been preparing for this longer than I'd realized. Her hours had changed months ago, but I never questioned them because I was on the road half the time. She said the surgical center needed late coverage on Tuesdays. She even thanked me for being so supportive, while she picked up the slack. I wore that like a badge. The loyal husband, holding the fort, while she played house with someone else. Her phone, always face down. That had started in December. She claimed it was a habit she picked up from the clinic to avoid HIPAA violations. I actually applauded her for being so conscientious. And the perfume? That had started around Valentine's Day. I'd complimented it. Jesus. I helped her pack for the nights she spent in another man's bed. That weekend, I told her I wanted to do something together, reconnect. "Things have felt off," I said, "and I miss you." She blinked hard, like she hadn't expected that. Like guilt had been waiting for a crack to crawl through. "Yeah," she said softly. "Me too." We drove out to a winery in Walla Walla. Ate lunch on the patio. Held hands on the walk back to the car. I watched her closely. She was trying. I could see it. But the trying wasn't for us. It was for the mask. On the drive back, she rested her head on my shoulder at a stoplight. "I love you," she said. And that's when it hit me. She still did. In her way. But not in the way I needed. Not in the way that made me safe. She loved me like an old sweater. Familiar. Warm. But not exciting. And she wasn't going to stop. Not on her own. That night, when she fell asleep next to me, I slid out of bed and sat at the desk in the hallway. I opened my laptop, pulled up the car insurance dashboard, and downloaded the driving logs for the past 60 days. Every entry, every turn, every visit to the condo. Then I created a backup folder and stored it on a flash drive I hid inside the casing of an old mechanical pencil. I wasn't taking chances. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew this. I wanted a divorce, but I didn't want her to see it coming. The following week, I met with a divorce attorney named Naomi Cruz. She came highly recommended by a colleague. Sharp, precise, zero patience for BS. Exactly what I needed. I handed her the drive, told her everything. Every Tuesday, every receipt, every gap in the timeline. She reviewed it in silence, then looked up. With what you've shown me, and depending on how your assets are structured, we could initiate proceedings under fault-based grounds. Infidelity gives us leverage, especially if she's cohabitating, even temporarily, with another partner. I don't want to destroy her, I said, but I want out, and I want peace. Naomi leaned back in her chair. Peace is expensive. Revenge is cheaper. Justice sits somewhere in the middle. I'll get you justice. What followed was the hardest performance of my life. For 4 weeks, I played the loving husband. I made dinner. I did yard work. I scheduled a weekend getaway. I even let her borrow my truck to help a friend move. I tracked the trip. She never left downtown. I pretended I didn't see the lipstick stain she tried to wipe off her neck after a late meeting. I pretended I didn't know, but I knew. And every time I kissed her, I imagined her flinching the moment the papers would arrive. Because they would arrive. In public. At work. Served in front of her peers. Naomi's idea, not mine. She's been bold. We'll be bolder, she said. There was one more thing we needed to do. A financial trace. Meredith and I had 2 joint accounts, checking and savings. But she had a 3rd account under her name only, supposedly for medical savings and continuing education. I'd never touched it. Never needed to. Until Naomi suggested we subpoena the activity. Turns out, there were transfers. Regular ones. From our joint account into hers, often followed by large ATM withdrawals. Thousands over the past few months. What would she need cash for? Naomi asked. I didn't have to guess. Ben didn't make much. She was funding the fantasy. The cheating wasn't just physical. It was financial betrayal, too. She wasn't just leaving the marriage emotionally. She was robbing it. I thought the worst part would be the discovery. It wasn't. The worst part was lying next to her every night, pretending to be asleep, while she scrolled through her phone with that little half-smile. The one I hadn't seen directed at me in months. The worst part was hearing her whisper "good night" to someone who wasn't me before turning off the light. The worst part was realizing she didn't even feel guilty anymore. She had rewritten the story in her head. I was cold. I was gone too often. She was lonely. As if that justified anything. As if I had vanished first. The night before the papers were served, I made her dinner. Pan-seared halibut. Her favorite. Lemon risotto. A bottle of that Syrah she always raved about but said was too expensive for a random night. I don't deserve this, she said, giggling, cheeks pink. And for a second, I almost believed she meant it. We sat on the porch afterward. Watched the sky go gold and violet behind the tree line. She leaned into me. You've been so sweet lately. I think we're in a better place. I kissed her hair. And in my head, I whispered. Tomorrow, everything changes. The first thing I noticed the morning she was served wasn't her absence. It was the stillness in the kitchen. No coffee brewing. No fridge door swinging shut. No quiet hum of her voice humming along to the same playlist she always put on while she got ready for work. Just stillness. I knew what it meant. Naomi had sent the process server to the surgical center at 8:15 a.m., just after Meredith finished pre-op briefings and before the team went under the lights. That window was intentional. Public, but not humiliating. Legal, but undeniable. And still, I imagined the look on her face when the man said her full name, asked her to confirm it, and handed over the thick envelope with my signature on the first page. I imagined her fingers trembling on the seal. The recognition of my attorney's name. The quiet, consuming dread when she saw the cause of action listed in bold. Dissolution of marriage, fault-based grounds, adultery, and financial misconduct. She didn't come home that night. She didn't text. She didn't call. That, more than anything, told me the truth. Meredith wasn't preparing to fight. She was trying to figure out how to explain herself. And that's exactly what she did 2 days later. It was a Friday afternoon when she finally returned. Late. Rain clinging to her coat. She stepped into the house like she wasn't sure she belonged in it anymore. She looked thinner, like something had already been taken from her. "Noah," she said quietly, "please let me explain." I didn't say no, but I didn't say yes either. She sat down at the kitchen table without being asked. I stayed standing. I wanted her to feel the shift. "It didn't mean nothing," she started. I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't mean nothing?" She blinked. "I mean, it wasn't meaningless, but it wasn't what you think. It wasn't serious. You were with him every other Tuesday for 7 months." She opened her mouth. Closed it. "I mapped it, Meredith," I said. "I cross-referenced the GPS logs, your work calendar, the account withdrawals, even the receipts for your Uber rides when you didn't want the mileage showing up on the car app. You planned around it. You budgeted for it. You protected it." Tears welled in her eyes. I know what I did." "Then why do you sound like you're still trying to soften it?" "I didn't mean to fall into it," she said, almost pleading. He made me feel seen. For the first time in a long time. And I didn't?" "No, I'm not saying that." "Then what are you saying, Meredith?" I leaned in, voice cold. "That I was too steady? Too boring? That I never made you feel dangerous?" She looked down. That silence was an answer all its own. The truth she couldn't say, and I'd already accepted, was this. I made her feel safe, but not alive. And somewhere along the way, she started mistaking stability for invisibility. She didn't cheat to destroy me. She cheated to find herself. But she didn't think I'd have the spine to walk when I found out. She underestimated me. The next morning, we met with the attorneys. She brought a lawyer I'd never seen before. Mid-30s, looked like he played racquetball with realtors on weekends. He tried to appear calm, but I caught the flicker in his eye when Naomi handed over the documentation. Printed logs, screenshots, photos, a full financial summary of every dollar she funneled out of our joint account into her private one before withdrawing it as cash. $1,000 here, $900 there, over $18,000 in total. "I used that for continuing education," she said quietly. "You used it for hotel rooms and dinners," Naomi corrected, flipping to the receipts page. "And for funding his car repair, which you paid for in cash." Meredith didn't deny it. I watched her lawyer scribble a note, whisper something about limiting exposure. That was the first moment I saw it land. This wasn't just personal failure anymore. It was legal. Back home, she hovered in the doorway of the guest room she'd moved into, like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the right shape for it. I walked past her. She followed. "Noah, I'm not going to fight you," she said. "I won't ask for anything beyond what's fair. I know I messed this up. I broke it." I stopped in the hallway. "You didn't just break it. You disassembled it. Carefully, like someone picking apart an old watch." Her face crumpled. "I didn't mean to hurt you. You meant to protect the lie. That's worse." I walked away. This time, I didn't look back. That night, I stood in the laundry room, folding a stack of towels. The house was quiet again, but it was a different quiet now. Before, the silence had been full of doubt, questions, rot. Now it was clean, cold, like air after a storm. I wasn't okay. Not yet. But for the first time in a year, I didn't feel like I was drowning. The following week, Naomi finalized the division agreement. Because of the fault-based grounds and the financial misconduct, Meredith wouldn't be eligible for spousal support. Not under Idaho law, not in this situation. She would leave with her own savings account and the personal property she came into the marriage with. No claim on the house. No portion of my retirement fund. No alimony. She didn't contest it. Didn't even try. It was like she knew. Somewhere deep down, she knew she'd built her new life on sand. And now the tide was rolling in. A few days later, I found her sitting outside on the back porch. She looked up at me, eyes red but dry. "No makeup. No show. I kept thinking you'd yell," she said. "That you'd scream at me. That you'd throw something. But you didn't. You don't scream at someone when the building's already collapsed," I said. "You walk out. Quietly. Before it buries you." She nodded. Looked out toward the trees. "You were a good man, Noah. You still are." "I know," I said. "I don't deserve your kindness." "You're not getting it," I said gently. "You're getting my silence." Divorce is never clean. Even when the paperwork is pristine, the financial lines drawn, the signatures inked without hesitation, it leaves residue. Ghosts in the hallways. Muscle memory that hasn't caught up to the truth. Like how I still reached for 2 mugs every morning. Or how I still hesitated at the grocery store near the pasta aisle, where Meredith always insisted on getting the ridged kind. Holds sauce better. Small, stupid habits that hadn't gotten the memo. The night she moved out, I didn't watch her pack. I couldn't. She didn't take much. A couple of suitcases. Her mother's quilt. The silver photo frame from our honeymoon in Glacier National Park, though she left the photo behind. I found it in the kitchen drawer later. The two of us standing by the lake, arms wrapped around each other like we didn't know anything could ever go wrong. The sky was this perfect blue behind us. Stupid, impossibly blue. I didn't tear it up. I didn't burn it. I slid it back into the drawer and closed it gently. Not because I wanted to remember, but because I needed proof that at some point, it was real. Ben never moved in with her. That part surprised me. I don't know if he dumped her, or if she realized the fantasy couldn't survive the daylight. But 2 weeks after she left, I heard through a mutual friend that she'd found a short-term rental near the South Hill trailhead. A one-bedroom. Bare bones. Temporary. That same friend also told me Meredith had cut back her hours at the surgical center. Something about needing time to deal with everything. I didn't gloat, but I didn't feel sorry for her either. This wasn't a tragedy. It was arithmetic. She subtracted loyalty, added deception, divided trust, and wound up with a remainder of nothing. What I didn't expect was how quiet my phone got. You lose people in the aftermath. Friends who feel forced to pick a side. People who liked you both and don't know how to stay in the middle. Even my sister took a few weeks to reach out. Said she didn't want to make it worse. But the people who stayed? Those are the ones you remember. My neighbor Jace dropped off a six-pack and said nothing. Just sat with me in silence as we watched the Mariners lose by 5 runs. He didn't ask questions. Just showed up. And that was enough. In the meantime, I worked. I drowned myself in project bids and site inspections. Traveled to Lewiston, Coeur d'Alene, and back to Spokane for a repair assessment on a badly maintained spillway. I took every consulting job that hit my inbox, even ones I usually passed over. The work kept my hands busy. The silence kept my thoughts dangerous. Because even though the divorce was final, I still didn't feel done. Something in me was still restless. Not angry, not vengeful, just unfinished. That feeling finally found direction 2 months after she moved out. I got a call from a man named Aaron Fields, a quiet civil engineer I'd worked with on a reservoir project near Priest River. He said a nonprofit was looking for technical consultants on a community water restoration effort, reviving ecosystems damaged by damming and urban sprawl. They need someone who understands water flow and infrastructure, he said. Not just biology, but pressure management, design logistics. Thought of you. I didn't hesitate. 2 weeks later, I was standing ankle-deep in a streambed choked with silt, surrounded by people who wanted to fix something they didn't break. It hit me then. This was it. This was where I'd rebuild. The project took up every spare second. Field reports, grant meetings, teaching volunteers how to read pressure monitors, watching the water flow slowly come back to life as we widened the channel and restructured the banks. There was something holy about it, something cleansing. It didn't replace the ache, but it gave it purpose. I wasn't trying to forget what Meredith did anymore. I was learning how to survive it. She emailed me once during that stretch. Subject line, just this one thing. It wasn't long, just a short message. Noah, I saw your name in an article about the restoration project. I'm glad you're doing something that matters. I think about you every day, not out of guilt, though I have plenty of that. I just wanted to say, I never felt more seen than I did with you. I didn't know how to be content. That was my failure, not yours. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I archived the email. Didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. A few days later, I ran into her by accident. It was at the farmer's market. She was standing by a stand of apricots, holding one gently in her hand like it might bruise if she breathed too hard. Her hair was tied back, simple, unstyled. No makeup, no smile. She saw me and froze. I nodded once. She nodded back. No words. No apology. No small talk. We passed each other like ghosts, both haunted by different versions of the same story. She walked away with nothing in her hands. That night, I took the old photo of us, the one from Glacier, and walked it out to the fire pit behind the house. I didn't burn it out of rage. I burned it because it didn't belong to me anymore. That man in the picture, with his arm around a woman who wasn't really his, he deserved to be let go. The flames took it gently. I watched the edges curl inward, blackening, then disappearing completely. I stood there until only ashes remained. Then I turned and walked back inside. I didn't know Meredith had started therapy until her lawyer contacted Naomi out of the blue. They weren't contesting the judgment, not reopening the settlement. That part was final. Instead, he passed along something strange. Meredith had requested to sign a written statement acknowledging financial misconduct and issuing a formal apology, documented, notarized, included in the official court record. She says it's about closure, Naomi told me over the phone. Wants to take responsibility in writing. At first, I laughed. Short, sharp. Closure? She'd already had it, just not in the form she liked. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. This wasn't for me. Not really. It was for her. And I didn't need it. I declined the request. Not to be cruel, but because I didn't need words from her anymore. I had actions. I had truth. I had distance. I had peace. And when you finally have peace, you learn to stop opening doors you've already locked behind you. That summer, the nonprofit offered me a permanent leadership role. I took it. Moved into a smaller place overlooking a river bend just west of Sandpoint. Nothing fancy, 2 bedrooms, old pine floors, a porch that faces the water. But it feels honest. Real. Mine. Every morning, I drink coffee out on the deck, watching the river roll wide and slow. It reminds me of what I learned through all of this. You can't always stop a current from changing, but you can learn how to move with it. One evening in late August, I was invited to speak at a community restoration summit down in Boise. Not about betrayal. Not about divorce. About recovery. About the science of repairing damage over time, how water always finds its path again, and how we can help it carve new channels when the old ones collapse. There were about 60 people in the audience. Students, volunteers, city officials. I stood there with my presentation notes in hand, heart steady, voice clear. Somewhere near the end of my talk, I paused and said something I hadn't planned. When a dam breaks, it's not just a loss, I said. It's a revelation. You get to see what was buried. You get to start over, deliberately this time. Smarter, stronger, with better foundations. Afterward, a woman in her late 30s came up to me. She'd volunteered with the restoration team for a few weekends and recognized me. You said something about rebuilding with intention, she said. That really stuck with me. Do you believe people can do that too? I smiled. I think they're the only ones who can. We talked for 20 minutes. Her name was Elena. Taught environmental science at a charter school. Thoughtful eyes. A way of speaking that didn't waste words. She didn't flirt. Neither did I. But something passed between us, unspoken, curious. Like the first tug of a tide. A few days later, she emailed me a copy of one of her students' essays about ecosystems and resilience. Said it reminded her of the summit. At the bottom of her message, she'd written, "Coffee sometime?" I waited 2 days before replying. Not because I wasn't interested, but because I learned the value of moving deliberately, of not rushing, of letting something earn its way into your life. As for Meredith, we haven't spoken since the spring. I hear things now and then. That she took a position at a smaller clinic. That she doesn't see Ben anymore. That she spends a lot of time alone. I don't wish her pain. I really don't. But I also don't miss her. Not the version I saw in those final months. Not the one who smiled while hiding whole pieces of her life from me. There's a kind of grief that turns into clarity. And once you find that clarity, you stop mistaking guilt for love. Sometimes I wonder what she tells people now. How she frames it. If she blames the distance. If she calls it a slow unraveling. If she conveniently forgets about the Tuesday visits, the siphoned cash, the lies wrapped in softness. Maybe she calls it a mistake. Maybe she says it taught her something. I don't know. And I don't care. Because I stopped trying to control how I'm remembered in someone else's story. I'm too busy writing my own. The restoration project was completed last month. We planted native grasses along the banks. Reintroduced stoneflies. Broke apart the old concrete slabs where a collapsed structure once blocked the natural flow. And now the water moves clean again. Clear. Unburdened. Like it never forgot how to be free.